Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We are live. Good morning if you're joining us on LinkedIn, and good morning if you're joining us on YouTube. We were literally just chatting away. Or like it's always the way I sort of just get deep in conversation just as we're literally about to go live. And we were talking about the Meltzer Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, which is a little tip I'd give anybody actually in terms of if I go back to like hashtag Follow Friday. Apart from Mie Ostergaard, who I've got with me, the Meltzer Centre of, I think it's called Inclusion and Belonging, the Meltzer Centre at NYU, David Glasgow and Kenji Yoshino are, as I was saying to Mia, they're becoming almost like some of the leading global voices in this work, especially with the US lens in terms of all of the legal stuff that's going on in the States around race and gender and all of the legal challenges. Their background is law. So they come at this from kind of like employment law and then inclusion and belonging. So yeah, there's a little tip. Before we've even started, 1 minute in, and we've gone with some value. Mia, it's so good to have you with me. And you're joining us from slightly cold and maybe slightly grey Denmark this morning as well. Mia, so
Morning,
welcome.
everybody. Thank you so much, Cheryl.
Oh, you're welcome. Good morning. If you're joining us live, please do say good morning in the chat. I feel like, can I see the sea in the background, Mia, from where you are? Is that the sea?
It's a lake and it's still
It's a lake.
frozen.
No way.
Yeah. So I don't know if anybody has been north of the UK this winter, but it's been one of the most coldest winters ever.
Really?
So there's been snow, there's been minus 15 degrees, which people think of Denmark as snow and cold and
Yeah.
winterly. It doesn't actually exist. So Denmark is on the same level as Glasgow-ish. So it doesn't actually
Okay.
get snow or get that cold. We have no mountain. We have more than 350 islands in Denmark. So having snow
Gosh.
and ice is very not typical for Denmark.
Yeah.
So it's been a
Wow.
very cold winter.
Yes, very cold winter. Good morning, Sylvia Anna. Good morning, Sylvia Anna. I will just say you're on my to-do list, as in my to-do list of to reach out. Sylvia Anna, I think, is one of the most regular listeners to this LinkedIn Live. Sylvia Anna, I am going to be inviting you to come to this side of the screen very soon. So I'm just putting that out there into the world. So you heard it here first. We've also got Adrian Aarons. Good morning. Cornwall will be rainy soon. I'm sure it will. I've been out walking this morning and it was very, very rainy. Whereabouts in Denmark are you, Mia? For those that maybe know it.
It's yeah, I'm in some place called Sunds, which is close to
Okay.
Herning. So if any football fans, it's FC Midtjylland.
Okay.
Well, they qualified for the quarterfinals of the European League. That's why I mentioned that. But
Yeah.
otherwise, you wouldn't probably know. It's north of Legoland. Let's describe it that
North of
way.
Legoland. Yeah. Morning, Junior Beeman. Happy Friday. Morning, Oprah. Junior Beeman affectionately calls me Oprah, Mia. So just for reference, or the Oprah of the ERGs. Anyway, Junior is the multicultural lead, global multicultural lead. I always get it wrong. It's so long, Junior. It needs to be shortened. Junior is the global multicultural lead for NatWest. And we were on an interesting call yesterday and realized that because it's Lunar New Year, right? So
Mhm.
happy Lunar New Year to everyone. But I was on a call. I am the year of the rats, and I was on a call with two of the rats. We were like, we're three rats. So good morning. I've got Mie Ostergaard with me, and then we are going to be talking about International Women's Day, which isn't too far away. So if you have anything to do with women's networks, this is maybe going to get you thinking. And obviously, we've got a slightly provocative title. Is it making any difference? Right. So I'm going to read out your bio, Mia, and I have a tradition on this show where I get Claude. It used to be ChatGPT, but I've dashed ChatGPT away. So I get Claude now to write your bio, and then you get to score it out of 10, right? So
Okay.
here we go. So Mie is the co-founder of Impact, a global culture consultancy that partners with organizations to build inclusive, human-centered practices. She's also the founder of the Female Leadership Events series. Before launching Impact, Mie was the global DEI lead at Skyscanner, diversity and inclusion manager at Arsenal Football Club, and head of ED&I at the Forward Trust. Earlier in her career, she created the Tackling Racism series for Sky Sports News and has worked across sports, media, and the charity sector, including roles with the Rio Ferdinand Foundation. She brings over a decade of experience in DI strategy, cultural campaigns, and making change stick.
Wow.
How did Claude do?
It's pretty accurate, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would probably give it a good 9 out of 10. It got a lot in there.
Yeah, well, you've done a lot. You, you've done a lot.
It's so funny, Cheryl, because you said like your trade is accounting when we were chatting just before.
Yeah, yeah,
And people often ask me, so what did you do before working in DEI? Because a lot of
yeah,
people, as we know, came in during 2020, during the COVID and the murder of George Floyd.
yeah.
I can actually say that I spent my whole career, my last 12 years working in
Mm,
diversity and inclusion. I haven't done
yeah.
anything else. And I don't have any other trades.
You have no other skills. It's fine. Which isn't quite true because you were explaining that you did a master's actually. Maybe we'll just sort of start there because I think it's quite interesting. Junior cracked me up there. He said at least we're not the three blind mice. Yeah, we weren't the three blind mice. Because you were just telling me that so you're quite the global citizen because actually you do live in the UK most of the time, but you're home for the weekend. But you've also lived in the US, and you went there to do a master's. So just explain why you chose that particular topic to do your master's in.
So I looked at different topics, and Sarah, as we spoke about, you can't actually do any degrees within diversity and inclusion. There is
Hmm.
areas around it. We can talk about human rights. There's
Yeah,
around political, uh, different political master's degrees, but there
hmm,
isn't anything to do around inclusion programs yet. I would
yeah,
love to see it coming, but I thought project management is such an important tool when we talk about diversity and inclusion because it's just like anybody who works full time in DI role will know you have your toes in everything, or you should have anyway, what the company is doing, right? It should be transformative
yeah,
everywhere in the
yeah,
company. It's not just sitting in HR or
yeah,
sitting with the CEO office. So I thought project management is a good tool set both for my career now, diversity and
hmm,
inclusion, but any future things I
yeah,
want to do and in my private
yeah.
life as well.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know what? I couldn't agree more. And yeah, as we were saying off camera, like so most people know that I'm an accountant by trade, but I actually spent a lot of my corporate life doing projects, programs, and then like the last stint was like leading big transformation. And so it was actually last week, and I was explaining. Somebody was asking me what I do, and I said, well, I basically try to teach transformation skills to network leaders because I think you're absolutely right in terms of making the change that's needed around inclusion and a topic like this, whether it's making any difference. You've got to have some sort of toolkit, whether that is behavioral psychology. I know that we've got Adrian and Sylvia Anna on, and their work I know is more holistic and even maybe goes towards like the therapeutic side, but you've got to bring some tools to match with the theory of inclusion, right? So that in itself I think is quite interesting and maybe leads quite nicely into the conversation.
Yeah, and I think, Cheryl, we work in an area, as I mentioned, during 2020 when there was a big boost in DI roles,
Hmm.
people hiring their first DI professionals within organizations, small, medium, large. Still 2022, when I started the Forward Trust, I was the first ever. Like there were still a couple of companies, and
Hmm.
we don't have the framework or the tool set, or
Mm.
it's not like an accounting of this is right and wrong, or
Yeah,
these are the different tools that exist, or software. Like within diversity and
yeah,
inclusion, I
yeah,
think a lot of us, and also different story and different topic for another day. Why so many DEI initiatives have failed is because there was never any, here's the results, or here's the framework, or here is the tools to actually make it work and make it stick, because it was never developed in that way. It was developed out of passion for doing more, for all of the inequality that exists within our work environment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's, I mean, maybe I need to get, I probably, I know who I need to get back on here to talk about this, the thing about the industry, and almost like because the industry is quite, or as a discipline, it's quite, it's still quite immature really as a discipline, right? This work of diversity, equity and inclusion. So as you say, there isn't the clear framework of, the roles, what they do, the toolkit that you use, the accountability, the governance, the data, all of that. So your companies are almost just relying on the individuals to hopefully bring some of something, or know what experts they need to bring in, is certainly what I see. Yeah,
absolutely agree.
So we're going to get into this. Cognitive change will not happen unless there is authentic psychological safety. So as I was saying, Sylvia, there's different, people come at this through different angles. And I know, for example, some people really lean into that kind of the one-to-one coaching with leaders as being one of the effective ways of making sure that people at the top get this. And so then it starts to cascade down. I mean, when I talk through your introduction, you've done a lot, right? And it's really interesting that you've literally only ever worked in DI. I think you're one of only a few people that I know that can say that. Good morning, Jill, as well. So your journey through your career in different fields, sort of sports, media, corporate, etc. How has that shaped your view of what actually drives change? Drives real culture change in organizations.
It's such an interesting question, and I often say, so when I was at Skyscanner last year, I was actually there on the maternity cover and helping out as the global DI lead. It was my first role within, I would say, proper corporate. It's definitely the tech world. What I really saw was the framework and the progress they made was so much more clear than I ever seen before, because it was really followed by rules. And this is there's 75 people working in the wider people team, including how do we measure gender pay gap. And I know we're going to talk a lot more about that when we talk about International Women's Day. But what I really saw was they had frameworks for everything. There's measurements. There's people actually measuring on the data that existed, on promotion, on levers, on intersectional data as well, where having worked particularly in football, I would say it's much more grey zoned. And I think I made up that sentence, but it's much more nepotism. It's much more we do this because we like these people, we like working with this, rather than actually frameworks and policies and procedures. I think as a wider industry, sport as a whole doesn't really have the same policies and procedures and following rules that exist in the corporates. And I think when we look at the gender pay gap reporting, it's a clear evidence that actually with proper data, proper reporting mechanism, there is slight reduced inequalities, where when it comes to who gets the roles, the nepotism part, which very much exists within football, there is still a massive imbalance.
Well, I mean, there's that saying, isn't there? What gets measured gets managed, or what gets measured gets done, right? So the data, some of the things, I'm just picking up on some of the things that you said there, the importance of, so this is in terms of what drives change, the data, the processes and procedures, etc., the systems. It's really funny, even though, we're in a world that's like post, George Floyd, as you were saying earlier, we were talking. I still had an email this week from somebody asking whether I do unconscious bias training, and I thought, wow, I haven't had one of those for a while. And even to call it that, do you know what I mean? Even though internally they were wrestling with it, but they were sort of saying, oh, I think we need this. And actually, I sort of said, well, why do you think that? And I always remember, it's often, you might hear this as well. people come to you and they say, well, something happened. Something happened, as in somebody said something that they shouldn't have, somebody did something, all of that stuff. And actually, when I went back to them, I said, I think what you actually might need to do is actually redesign that process to bring in more objectivity. So I said, rather than going with like a vague, let's talk about biases and all, and we can do that if you want to do that. But actually, I said, I think if you want to really de-risk the chance of that happening again, I said you need to look at the process and the system that's behind it. So I love the answer that you gave there in terms of like looking at everything as well as obviously the data. So let's get on to International Women's Day, because I know this is your area. So we've got the official UN theme for 2026. So for anybody that's watching this, the official UN theme, and we are going to get onto the fact that there are two themes floating around, is rights, justice, action for all women and girls. And it does certainly feel as though the language is a lot stronger, I would say, than previous years. But there are still a lot of issues around women. So for example, violence against women and girls, reproductive rights being rolled back, etc. Would you agree that we are seeing sort of signs of regression? Almost, are we going backwards? And how does it show up in the workplaces? Do you think we're going backwards in terms of women's rights and gender equality?
I have twofold opinions on this. So I know we started talking about violence against girls and women. Like, first of all, it's not right not to mention all of the survivors of the Epstein's and everything that's happening. I am sure everybody on this call, since you joined into this conversation, will have felt so much anger and disbelief. I'm currently reading Nobody's Girl, which is absolutely heartbreaking. But I'm doing it. It's hard, and I would say you have to be in the right headspace and be careful and take care of yourself first, as always. But it was a way for me personally to feel like I feel so hopeless in the world right now that feels so unfair. And I know in some ways it's not news, because this has existed for, we're talking 20, 25 years. But what's coming out now is obviously like heartbreaking, and for anybody who's been a victim of sexual assault, it must be extremely hard times to go through. So that's one thing I would say around where we are right now. I definitely felt it personally a lot more recently. And in terms of the rights of women, there's places in this world right now, the states are a horrible example. I would say great example, but it's not, it's negative, of where we're taking back women's rights, the rights of our bodies, for sure. There's other places where we had a massive win yesterday in Europe, and it's called My Choice, somebody on the call hopefully saw it and can correct me here. My Voice, My Choice had a big win in the European court yesterday about women's rights, bodies. So that's one side of what happens, more of our rights when it comes to our bodies, voting rights, etc. And then there's the workplace, right? I do think sometimes they're interchangeable, of course. But there's also things like the gender pay gap, which, being positive, that there is a positive. In the UK, we added that in 2017, right? Companies over 250 employees have to report on gender pay gap. When we look at the stats, the data from since 2017 until 2025, which is the most recent data we have, it's positive, most of it, right? Especially the bonus. The bonus was 30% men made more in bonuses than women, and that's reduced massively. And the overall gender pay gap has gone down. And as you said, what gets measured? Like, it's embarrassing for companies to have big gender pay gap. With 2017 was a big shock, and people were like scrambling together to find their numbers. And how do we use this data? So from a
Yeah.
positive side, to not be all negative of the world we're living in right
Yeah.
now, there is some change and there's
Mm.
positive companies
Yeah.
that does measure who gets promoted, who gets the bonuses. Okay, actually what we measured on 10 years ago doesn't work because it's a different skills that we need and want, and also different ways that
Yeah.
we can see that men and women provide differently.
Yeah.
I talk about culture bearers. So when we talk about ERG leads, ERG
Hmm.
diversity champions, they don't they have soft skills, they have human, we want to
Mm.
create a better culture here.
Yeah.
That doesn't always get measured in data and money, and especially in the tech world,
Yeah.
right? So how do we add that into our bonus systems and our pay promotions? That we need those culture bearers because they're
Yeah.
extremely positive for companies, extremely positive. I can't speak highly enough about people who give their lived experience to making things better.
Yeah. 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 That I mean, so many so many points that you've covered, Mia.
Sorry.
And no, absolutely fantastic. And and the answer that, and just the answer that you've given, which the reality is, it's not as straightforward as, is it all going backwards? There's nuance in it, and there is complexity. Sunaina, good morning. Good morning, Auntie Sunaina. Thank you. It's my voice, my choice. Thank you for sharing that, Sunaina.
Thank you.
And then on the measurement as well, I just want to dive back into this because, Adrian, I think this is something we spoke about as well. It's getting that balance, and I think Mia, you covered it in terms of, yes, there are things that we can measure, and actually that probably does help to drive progress, especially in the corporate space. But then there is the unmeasurable or the immeasurable. I don't know what the term is. So Adrian has put here, I appreciate the measurement. I spend a lot of time looking at what's harder to measure, because that's often where what's deeply human gets lost. And focusing purely on the measurable or trying to make every element measurable can be reductive or worse. I really appreciate that comment, Adrian. I think that's what you were linking to me in terms of, especially when we think about the employee networks, and the levels of empathy and the levels of themselves that they give to this work, which is not measurable, is incredible. And actually, I mean, the change that it can make, I've literally seen, I'm thinking of a specific ERG leader who I have seen influence like the culture of the C-suite. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's and you can't measure it. Like, to your point as well, Adrian, you can't measure it. Unconscious bias training, Sylvia, and yes, somebody asked me for unconscious bias training, and it's 2026. I'm very pleased to hear that someone is asking for that, because it is still a real thing. It absolutely is. If anybody's watching The Traitors, which is something I mentioned on a panel this week, I would approach it from a nervous system point of view, though, not simply as a cognitive educational point of view. I love that, Sylvia, and I absolutely love that. I really appreciate that. Sunaina, with the tea, a cup of tea there. Okay, perfect. All right, you started talking about gender pay gap, so maybe we should just dive into that, because there is something about, and the gender pay gap is actually a little bit more complex than it seems at first glance, because actually, and you probably know this, when we dive into it by age, for example, and obviously we're probably talking now a little bit more UK and maybe a little bit more US centric, but when you dive into it by age, there are some differences. So do you want to just talk about and just dive into the gender pay gap, what we can learn from it, and why you think that actually the reporting has driven change as well?
I think the most positive thing with the gender pay gap is that we're now talking about making the disability pay gap and the ethnicity pay gap reporting as well mandatory in the UK. Because, as I said, positively, we can see the gender pay gap has made positive differences. And from an intersectional point of view, as you're saying, we know Black women are the one that earns the least. So when we can start measuring that as well, like, that will really help us move the needle of why we still need these conversations, why diversity and inclusion absolutely should go nowhere. So the gender pay gap, when we talk about International Women's Day, and when we talk about like one event, one celebration, one conversation. It ain't gonna change any systems. I ain't gonna move the needle of the gender pay gap that is still very much exists. But what it can do, that reporting that comes every year, can talk about all the things we're doing, because it's not one thing. People are not. We are not binary. Women are not the same, right? And let's talk about age diversity within women, perimenopause, menopause, motherhood or parenthood are huge factors into women's life and how we're doing in the job market. And that necessarily don't show in the gender pay gap because it's not intersectionally linked yet. It is to come. And I think that would help us massively. But what it does show us that the bonus systems are reduced. That means that companies are doing something to measure it and how and what we as I mentioned, what we give bonuses based on. And there's things around entry level. So the pay level at entry level are equal. It's when we move upwards. And I think right now in 2026, the new stat out of the top 100 FTSE companies, still, I think it's 9 women as CEOs. So there's
and then every
things
time you lose one, and every time you lose, sometimes it kind of, I think the highest it's been, I want to say like maybe in the last 10 years is maybe 11, I want to say, but it always, it pops up and then obviously they leave, and then and they, in the FTSE 100 in particular, they tend to get a lot of grief from the stock market and the investor analysts, and then they drop off, and so you lose them. I love the comments though about metrics and the gender pay gap, and I just want to dive into. So good morning, Teo. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. There is a danger that easy to measure metrics drive perverse incentives and lead to a false sense of success. Absolutely. I literally said that this week in a workshop. We must focus on what is important, not what is easy to measure. That's really important in this work. Gender pay gap is a systems generated issue. It's the complete system. I had a conversation, I want to say about 4 or 5 weeks ago, with somebody in the Big Four who shall remain nameless. But interestingly, when we were talking about performance appraisals, calibrations, internal promotions, and pay gap, I was talking about whether they measure things like discretionary pay rises, out of cycle pay rises, discretionary bonuses. And he said, we've stopped that. And I can't help but wonder whether it's things like the pay gap reporting that's driven that, because actually a lot of the variance does grow from things like, and I know it's certainly back in my day, if I say that, out of cycle, discretionary pay rises that were being given to people, etc. A lot of those micro decisions are what then would add up to these pay gaps that would grow, as you say, over time and with age as well. I don't know whether you've seen evidence that is reducing in organizations, these kind of like, oh, I'm going to award that person an extra 10% because they're a good guy or whatever.
I definitely think that when you follow a bit more procedures and you do all the data, as I said, with the bigger company and the more data you report on and measure, the more you can also see where it's going right and wrong. I think in the Europe next year, 2027, it becomes legal, or you have to publish salary on any job description. And I think that is going to be a positive change as well, because one thing is, people who apply for jobs and the job market, there's going to be less wasted time, I think, both from the employer and the employee. But I think when you are then in a company and you see the pay bands being posted, you then know, like each company will have to have pay bands, which obviously we know within the NHS and in the government we've had in the UK for a long time, but within the private sectors, it's never existed. You've never been able to measure yourself of what people who've just come in. I think that will make, I know that's not in the UK, but that's in the rest of Europe now. And I think it's next year that all jobs have to be transparent on I don't think it's necessarily one salary, but within the salary band, I think it is.
Yeah. I think that transparency will definitely help. And the other thing I want to throw in as well, I was kind of almost like Sylvia Anna's point around unconscious bias was just reminding me of this. That when it comes to salaries, even like, for example, starting salaries, so when somebody's going for a job, the bias around that process, as in like agreeing that first salary, whether you're going through a recruiter, which I have done, did do for a lot of my career, or going direct, if women tend to get sort of challenged a lot more, especially the more experienced and senior roles, and some of that bias often comes from women that are recruiting. We as women are often biased against women, especially when it comes to money. We don't like women that ask for more money. That's and I've been on the other side of that, as in, when I've gone into a client and I've this is before this work, but when I was doing transformation and I've said that's my day rate, right? And they're like, oh, is there any room for negotiation? I'm like, no. but even as women, we're not great at it. I want to just get onto the theme, the International Women's Day theme, just to bring like a little bit of controversy or a little bit of spice to this. Are you aware of the whole controversy around these two themes? Maybe just explain it for people that maybe don't know that there are two themes floating around on the internet.
Well, the UN, every year for International Women's Day or Women's History Month, I think they also describe it as, they have a theme. And I like to think that it's built on data and reports from previous years, because they've been doing this for 35 years, I think now. But there is an unofficial place also called International Women's Day that makes their own theme every year. And I don't think, Sarah, when you asked me the question, I was like, I don't think people know. It's too different, because a quick Google just gives you one of the other. And people don't actually know that these official themes comes from the UN. So they go onto a website that looks very professionally, looks very real, or it is. And I don't know why these people started this website and wouldn't build it together with the UN, if that's what I don't actually know the background of why that started. And I think the question, what theme you choose, some organization also don't feel every year the theme goes with what they want to do. I remember, is it a year and a half? No, 2-3 years ago, it was for Black History Month, it was saluting our sisters. And I thought it was fantastic theme, really talking about Black women's experience in the workplace. But I was at the time in a workplace that said, no, we want to talk about Black men instead. I can't remember. We had a agreement with the prostate cancer.
Right.
And it was a whole year theme that they'd done a lot of work of both blood donation and prostate cancer hits Black men 1 in 4, I think, where it's only 1 in 8 white men, I think, something like that. And they went off that year's topic, which made sense to them. And it also like, this is the work we've done for a whole year. This is what we're building into, and we want to do an extra Black History Month event, and we're already doing a whole year action plan and progress and measurement. And I think the same for International Women's Day. You don't necessarily need to follow any of these themes to make a difference and to do something right. If it doesn't sit within your whole strategy for the year, like at Skyscanner we had last year when I was there, our strategy was called Accelerate. So they wanted to accelerate women, and that was the theme for International Women's Day as well event. So I don't necessarily think following a theme just because the UN says so is. But I do think for organization that doesn't have DEI leads or ERG leads or a government official, I think a theme is fantastic, and every year creates something different. But I don't necessarily think that's it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you know what? It's interesting, as you were talking about the themes as well. And I must admit, I with the Black History Month, I know that I actually found last year's theme quite sort of challenging, and I it almost like felt like it was like being forced, especially at a time but I think some of it is just whether it works for you as part of what you're doing, or the messaging. I think last year it was was it Standing Firm in Power or something like that, I want to say, or
Yes.
Standing in Power, I think. But the theme, I don't know, and I'm keen to hear from people, like in the comments, what are your thoughts on when these awareness days have themes? Do you think does it help, or actually does it hinder? And are you, as Mie, as you presented, is it better to, if you are going to do something to mark that day, do something that aligns to the program of work that you're already doing, right? The actions that you're already doing, bring it in, make it more substantial, etc. I'm really keen to hear what people say in the comments. But I think there is that thing about, if you're looking for a theme, I mean, what's slightly annoying about the unofficial website is that the themes are always really catchy. Right? They're always, like, they use an alliteration. They've got loads of resources. Unfortunately, I think, as you were saying, they've kind of done it really well. So
Yes.
as you say, people go onto the website, you can get resources, you can get like sort of like little logos. I think you can apply to them, like, if you want to get like a little official, like little logos, and it's all color coded and everything. But it's marketing. It's what it is. It's very good marketing.
They've done very well.
Yeah, done very well. But I would definitely encourage, and you could even potentially have a conversation around the themes, and whether or not, do they make any difference, and talking about some of the things that we've talked about today, like the gender pay gap, like the systemic change that's needed, etc., is probably more substantial, unless you've already got a program of work, right, that you want to pull into this. Because I want to go back to what Teo said here. Systemic change is needed to reduce gender pay gap. It's not about changing women's behavior. It's about addressing how systems perceive men and women who have exactly the same life event, e.g. a man will get a pay increase because he has a family, whilst a woman will lose earning power as they are perceived to be less committed. Absolutely. And the thing I would add on to that as well is, all of the organisations making things like job cuts, etc., I hope that they're all doing equality impact assessments, right? Because I've seen that live in organisations where there literally has been a couple that both work in the organisation, and I have heard the conversations about why they would prefer to make the wife redundant and not the husband, right? So Teo, I absolutely understand. And so I think something about that, talking about, for example, the systems that mean that change is not happening, those sorts of things potentially are really good conversations for International Women's Day. Adrian's point here, not to center my perception, the gender pay gap hurts us all, especially in the long run, and I feel we need true feminine, and feminine as in from either gender, I think is what you mean, Adrian, there. True feminine leadership throughout organizations, not to make women solely responsible, but male-centered approaches to leadership accountable. So there's something about, female-coded and male-coded ways of leadership, and actually, how do we get to a situation where actually we reward and value some of the more female-coded leadership traits? I don't know what your thoughts are about that, Mie, the value that is placed on female-coded styles of leadership.
Yeah, just to come back to what you just touched on rather want to promote men over women, and there are the stats around, is it 60% of all women who works part-time, and maybe 85% of men work full-time, something like that scrutinize obviously both the data and the gender pay gap. And then on top of that, when you look at straight relationships where men and women are together, and if there's children in the household as well, women do 4 hours a day of free work, what's it called? What's the right word?
I don't know, free labor or something?
Yeah,
Unpaid?
free labor.
Yeah.
4 hours and against a man's 1 hour. And obviously this is a heterosexual relationship. That tells you a little bit. If a woman have already done 4 hours every day of work at home, and then come into the workplace, And of course, they're going to be delivering differently because she's already done half a job at home. Um, so if we talk about relationships like that, and I know
Yeah.
some households are trying to change a little bit, some women are trying to speak up a little bit more and change things. Some men are stepping up and starting to noticing and seeing it and breaking out of the still norm that we all been brought up into. But I think we need to think about that the workplace, it's not like a jacket you can just take on and off. It's not a physical thing.
Mm,
We're human beings, right? So what happens outside the workplace is also what happens with us or to us within the workplace. The
yeah.
trauma that we bring with us or the lived experience in our relationship, and
Mm,
just to bring it that like human aspect to it. So when we talk about masculinity and the feminine, I think the stats around COVID, uh, where they looked at the death numbers of Finland, New Zealand, Denmark, Iceland, was Germany, that all had female prime minister at the time. If you
right.
looked at the leadership and the likability of the prime minister and all of the
Mm-hmm.
stats that
Mm,
you can think of and the measurement, those were the countries that was doing the best,
mm,
comparing to male-led
mm-hmm.
countries. And we still don't talk about it enough that
Mm,
female leadership and all of the stats shows that both when women invest, we do better on the long term and overall than men do.
yeah.
Women leadership do better over time. But I don't know why we're then still afraid of women's leadership. And funny enough, talk about themes and International Women's Day events. With the female leadership I created, um, allies are included as well. But the theme
Mm-hmm.
for this year's event that I'm doing on the 24th of March is when women are not supporting women. Because I do think that's a really important topic, because it's
Yeah.
not always on men to have more women leaders. It's also women pulling
Yeah.
up the ladder after them. And I think it's not what we should blame other women, because we are very much also brought up to see other women
Yeah.
as competition. As you said, we don't like seeing other women with money.
Mm-hmm.
Our jealousy towards other women, because we're not been brought up seeing role models of with women. So
Mm,
once we make it or move upwards, we think, oh, there shouldn't be women around us because we're not used to it.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's so
Sorry,
much
that went into it.
No. It's a topic, I mean, it's the whole women supporting women thing, and I love that your event is themed around that, because that is, and it's a topic that's talked about so much. But as you say, the reality is, the way that we've all been brought up in the system, we're all part of a system that has been trained to see women in certain roles, and that often includes ourselves, and men in certain roles. That's the reality of it. There's a brilliant book. I'm actually buying my book case so I could actually reach behind me potentially. Well, I actually quite like being down here now for my LinkedIn lives. There's a brilliant book that is on my recommended list, which is this one here. Oh, it's in reverse. The Authority Gap, by Mary Ann Seagart. The subtitle is Why Women Are Still Taken Less Seriously Than Men and What We Can Do About It. And if you're in an organization that is trying to figure out, how to get more permission for, sort of women to step into, their power, for example, that is a brilliant book, because it does talk about what we all assume about women in terms of their levels of authority, credibility, etc. And it does go into the intersectionality, which is something that you talked about, Mia, because it's not the same. And I know that for me, I really started to think a lot more intersectionally about women from some of the books that I've read and different lived experience, etc. So that's really important. I'm going to dive into the comments, and then we're going to delve into the things that organizations can do, right? So Teo Lee Chambers runs a male allyship organization that calls men into speaking up for change to support women. He does, and I can't remember exactly what it's called. I want to say that they actually do training for men around sort of like allyship as well. And there are a few people that are doing that now as well. Sylvia Annis put here, the theme for me next to be contextual, needs to be contextual, what is needed in the community. Also, my take is every day is Women's Day, Mental Health Day, etc. Yeah, I must admit, I'm actually getting a little bit tired of the awareness that I can't lie. Part of it is I don't have the time to actually keep up with them. Cliche, I know, but sometimes I feel that the one-day celebrations are used sometimes as tick box exercise. Absolutely. Can we pledge on Women's Day that every day we take one little step every single day to support women? Like Mia says, can we celebrate other women instead of taking them down? Absolutely. Yeah. And Teo, yeah, we are women all year long, not just on one day. Jill has put here, I'll have to research the latest evidence about the queen bee syndrome. That's something that certainly there was a lot of talk about this. I want to say like in the early to mid kind of like 2010s, so the early I believe it's certainly hotly contested. There is definitely something about that in terms of female competition and what we do or don't understand about it and what is or isn't real. Yeah, so let's get on to gender parity, and obviously, building on the back of, we've got all of these events, people are supporting International Women's Day. Is any of it making a difference? I mean, I know Sylvia has put there about it sometimes being just a tick box and lots of cupcakes and all of that stuff. Do you think any of it actually shifts the needle?
I have two different opinions on it.
Yeah, cool.
From a personal perspective, or the human side of it, yes, I feel empowered every year. I am also an extrovert who loves people, right? So when I go to an event and I listen to great speakers, or I get to sit on a panel with other women, or men for that matter, to talk about allyship, I have a sense of we can do this. There's people who care. There are some fantastic leaders. There are change coming. And the networking opportunity that exists within that. And we know networking, and again, one of the reasons why it shows that men are leading in every aspect, because their networks are bigger. They go to golf days with their buddies they went to school with, kind of thing. Women don't do that. We don't have the same kind of networks, professionally anyway. So I do think that individual feeling of feeling empowered, feeling a network, feeling those positive things that an event comes with. I do think so. I think it's positive, and it's my personal opinion on it. I have no evidence or data to leave with that. It is how I feel. As we talked about before, there's data we can measure, there's hard data, and there's that feeling, right? So I talk about the 3 R's when I talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So diversity is recruitment, equity is the rewards, promotion, and the third is the retention, right? It's inclusion, who's staying. So we are measuring how many women are leaving comparing to how many people are in the company, how many women are we recruiting. And I do think events where we build each other up, where we feel empowered, do have a small significant feeling towards the company, right? There's a reason why companies do the monthly be together, whatever people organization call them. There's a reason to bring everybody together, because they could easily send an email with all the updates. The time and money that it takes to put these events on, where all of the exec always get involved, there's evidence and there is a need for it. So I think having any of these mark days as a come together, like I had a conversation at some point with somebody who's a little bit against having these mark days, and it should be more about the process and the data and all of that. And we talked about a podcast. We had an internal podcast and a company for 1,500, and only 25 people had listened to it. And he said, he was the director, who said, these 25 people, I can't justify that we keep spending time and a bit of money on doing a podcast if only 25 people listen in. And I said, but the topic was mental health, and it was really deep. I was moderating it. It's around suicide. And I said to him, but what if What if that 25 people who listened in, we changed them? What if 5 out of those 25 people had thought about suicide? Was about to go off sick tomorrow and needed antidepressant or whatever horrible things that could have happened? What if those 25 people, we shift something? Isn't that more important that we had 500 people joining and none of them really cared? So I think numbers vs the whole quantity vs quality, right? Is a huge important thing for me. And that's the same with these events. Having incredible speakers, having the right topics, conversations, buy-in from leadership, showing allyship from a male CEO. People come to work the next day thinking, our CEO showed up for International Women's Day. It means something to him.
Yeah, I mean, it's I feel, and I think, you know, in your answer, you've sort of explored some of the nuance that's behind this, because it's not a clear yes or no, and I guarantee that when, mark my words, when International Women's Day comes around on LinkedIn, you're going to see people that are like, why are we doing this? And you're going to see, but I guarantee if there was an organization that didn't do anything, they'd soon know about it, right? So you're you're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I loved the thing about the networking thing. I want to come onto that. And you know, Teo talks about this as well, the sense of empowerment and networking. I was listening to people are going to think I'm obsessed with the Diary of CEO, but I'm not. But I was listening to the episode where it was Jonathan Haidt and a medical psychiatrist whose name I can't remember, from Harvard, and they were talking about the impact of social media, but they were talking about the increase in social isolation as a result of smartphones. And what they were saying was Zoom is not the same as meeting people in person.
No.
So I tell you what, Mia, I'm totally with you in terms of, you know, and don't anybody think that I'm telling everybody they've got to go into the office 5 days a week, but we've got to start meeting people more. Like literally at the start of 2026, I was like, I am devoting at least one day in my calendar to meeting people face to face. And if you want a meeting on that day, it has to be face to face, probably because I'm a little bit of an extrovert as well, right? So I need it. But you know, we're social creatures. We were meant to connect physically, not just via a screen. So I'm with you actually in terms of a little bit, in terms of, even if the event just really is about, you know, making people feel like, you know, a sense of together, the women in particular, a sense of empowerment, and to have people show up around them. At the same time, the one thing that I'm going to challenge, obviously, and this is where some of the heat comes for these things, going back to what Sylvia Anna was saying about a tick box, is at the end of the day, if people don't see progress in their organization, and I know that a lot of organizations, for example, they're looking at their board representation at a board level and they're like, it's going backwards. I know of ERG leaders, women's ERGs, where each time another man is appointed to the board, they get an email to say, why is there another man that's been appointed to the board? You know, where are the women? So there's that thing, I think, of you know, for it not to be a tick box, people want to see the change as well. So they want to come together and all of that, but they also want to see change, don't they? Goosebumps to you campaigning for the podcast. I know that was such a share, Adrian. Yes, I agree. Mere changing, affecting one life positively is progress, is success, is human connection. Especially with that topic that you were talking about, Mia, because you can guarantee if there had been a loss in the organization, you know, as a result of a death like that, that's huge, right? So absolutely. Equity and retention, systemic change actions, each organization, if say what change do we want to see this time next year, what plan do we have to achieve? Love that. So, you know, maybe bringing some more substance around the day. So what would it look like this time next year? What do we want to have achieved this time next year? Maybe somebody can record it and then play it every Women's Day. What did we say last year? And are we moving in the right direction?
I can actually, share a bit of a personal story when we talk about intersectionality and lived experience.
Yeah.
When I moved to New York, as I said, I studied a master at NYU. I didn't finish it. I had an accident. I hit my head, and I got a quite severe concussion. So I
Wow.
lived with a concussion for, I'm starting to get slightly better now, but it's 5 years.
Mm,
And it was really bad,
wow.
you know, in a dark room. And what was really hard for me was screen time. And 5 years later, I can't be at a screen for 8 hours a day.
Hmm.
So I learned the hard way. And obviously, this was right. COVID was still kind of the end of it. Working from
Hmm.
home was still very much there. So I first of all was very much no Zoom calls. I could do phone calls, like back to
Mm,
phone calls, which is very different. Again, way of
yeah.
connecting and talking rather than via a screen in the same way.
Hmm.
But I was also so conscious about when I'm in the office, I don't do Zoom calls. Like then we meet face to face. Like
Yeah.
so I think for me that was a huge learning curve and a forced one of
Yeah.
the least screen time. And I stick with it now, even when my head is better and my screen time is better. But
Hmm.
I'm very much I am
Mm,
also, as I said, an extrovert. So I love human beings. So for me, these networking events that is taken away from us a little bit, and people go to the office and then they sit 8 hours at a screen. I'm like, that should also not be the case. Like,
no,
don't go to the
no.
office to sit at a screen. Have
Yeah.
a bit more time and breaks in your calendars. The day you then go in and meet with people, make sure you
Yeah.
can eat lunch with your colleagues and drink a coffee in the afternoon,
Yeah.
and it's not
Absolutely.
sitting there on the screen, because
Yeah.
then that defeats the purpose, right?
What's the purpose? Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Taylor's put here we are disconnected by what should be connective technology. You know, social media is not social. I'm just going to say that. Nadia, good morning, Nadia. International Women's Day is a great opportunity to gain visibility, spotlight achievements. Yeah, love that idea actually. Spotlighting achievements on the day, amplifying conversations around inclusion. Visibility alone won't shift outcomes, but it can convince leadership to look at inclusion as a business priority rather than being positioned as a cultural side note. I love that. And also to one call to action as a focus to move for progress. Absolutely. If you can, with your International Women's Day or any other themed day events, try to focus it on action and sort of like shining a light and and comparing it to the previous year. We're going to be wrapping up soon. Tell us a little bit before we go to the last question, which is one thing that organizations can do. Tell us a bit more about your event on the 24th of March and where people can find out more about it.
Yes, so it's going to be in London. So for anybody who is
Mhm.
in London, it's going to be a Danish steakhouse, and I do it in collaboration with a Danish organization. But everything is in English. There's nothing
Yeah,
about Denmark except I'm Danish, and
yeah.
it was just an organization that obviously supports. I've been in England for 16 years, so for me it's just bringing a bit of my roots into it, but
Mhm.
it's not about
Nice.
Danishness at all, except I'm Danish. And it's a sit down dinner, so it's a very untraditional network, because what I
Nice.
discovered is going to these networking events, again, it's very much designed traditional way of
Like
men talking to
transactional.
men. Yes,
Yeah.
and standing in a room with a glass in your hand, and if you come to
Yeah.
events by yourself, which this event is very much made for, so it's a sit down dinner,
I
which
like that.
means that your conversation is completely different. And again, not many women have the opportunity to come sit down and enjoy themselves. So the
Yeah.
ticket is involved with a sit down dinner. It's a Danish steakhouse, but there's vegan and vegetarian options as well. um and we're going to talk about women not supporting women. So I was actually back and forth a little bit. It took me a little bit of courage, because it's also, I don't also want to put it on women. Why is it always women who
Yeah.
have to change? Why is it always
Yeah.
women
Yeah.
who needs to do it better?
Yeah.
Like, so I was a little bit back and forth. And then I also thought, should men be invited in? Should allies be invited in? Or should be a women only space? And a conversation with different people. And I actually lean towards men and allies absolutely needs to be in this space. Because I thought about it from an ally's perspective. Like, I often go to a lot of Black History Month events
Yeah.
as an ally, and I know white people needs to be in that room to make
Okay.
change. So
Okay.
I also thought, actually, men see women behaving badly towards other women. So actually
Right.
inviting men into
That's
this
so
conversation
interesting.
to
Yeah.
help move that conversation
Yeah.
is really important as well. So yeah,
That's
sometimes
so
when
interesting.
they say
Yeah.
diversity and inclusion can be a bit grey zone. There's not clear
Yeah,
answers, and
yeah, yeah.
it's not science, but it's also really
Mm,
difficult because human beings, and there's no right results or
yeah,
right answers. I think sometimes it's about
yeah.
gut feelings.
It's not science. Absolutely, it's not science. Sylvia Anna, so your event is around women supporting other women, or not supporting other women, as the case may be. Sylvia Anna's put here: women taking women down is a nervous system adaptation response, very old, linked to survival. It's nuanced and complex mechanism, very nuanced, too nuanced to discuss and explain in comments. That's why you need to come on the LinkedIn Live. That's why I do this, is because the comments are not long enough to explore some of these very complex complex issues. And also, Sylvia is asking, are there any Danish pastries?
As you talked
Right.
about, I am very against any stereotypical things. So when it comes to cupcakes and pastries, I'm like,
Yeah,
absolutely not. There will
yeah,
be red wine and steaks if you eat
yeah.
meat.
Red wine effect. It's a really interesting point though that you raised about, like, should men and allies be in the conversation? Should men, other genders, etc., be in the conversation? And that's a whole I'll have to get you back on again, unfortunately, to talk about that, because I don't think we've got long enough for that one. But it's a very interesting point that you make, like around the learning and everything. And yeah, but I love the sound of it as a network event. I think so much of what you said there in terms of, and do you know what? I wouldn't even say it's just traditional networking around the standing up thing. I absolutely hate when I go to an event, like an event that's got a drinks reception or an award, where you have to stand up. I'm in heels, for goodness sake. I can't stand up for like an hour before
Yeah,
we have to go in. Like, so I typically, I just turn up like 5 or 10 minutes before I know that I'm going to be sitting down. I mean, I should just not bother with the heels, right? But not everybody can stand
yeah,
for
so
for
true.
half an hour.
Yeah.
It's just so crazy. I don't know why we still do it for events. Anyway, what is one thing that organizations can do, not just in March, as has been mentioned in the comments, but starting now, actually, to make a measurable difference to gender equity in their workplaces?
It's such a great question. I would say create an action plan. So
Yeah,
one thing is having a strategy, but an action plan for me, like the framework and all of that behind it, action plan is where the ERGs get involved, where
yeah,
individuals can see, okay, from A to B, this is the actions and this is the outcomes. And
yeah,
I think we talk a lot about strategies and at a set level, but actually from
hmm,
individuals and especially ERGs, they need to understand the action
yeah,
plan. What are we
yeah,
actually doing? I don't care about the words of the strategy. I need to know what we're doing. I
yeah,
think a lot of people feel like that when they're not in the top level. They
yeah,
don't want another strategy. They actually want an
yeah,
action plan. So
yeah,
create action plans with your ERGs, because that's the actions to take that is
yeah.
needed, including
Action
International
plans.
Women's Day event.
Yeah, absolutely. So less, as I once heard somebody in the workplace say, less talking, more doing. That's all we need.
Exactly.
Sylvia, and where can people find details about your event, Mia? Assuming that you still have spaces. Do you still have
Yes.
spaces?
So if you go on my LinkedIn, so I only put my first name on here, I guess. So my name is Mie Ostergaard. It's spelled
Yeah.
Oestergaard. I
Mm.
think I am the only one. I posted about it yesterday, I think. But otherwise, you
Yeah.
can search DK UK Female Leadership 2026. It should come up for
Yeah.
International Women's Day.
That's lovely. That sounds lovely. And I love those kinds of events, where it's a dinner and you can get into like a really deep conversation. Like, absolutely love it. We're going to wrap things up there now. So it just leaves me to say thank you to everybody that has joined us live in the comments, especially if you've been with us for the entire conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Mia, thank you for joining us from Denmark. I know we're crashing into your weekend home, kind of catching up, I'm sure, with friends and family. So thank you for joining us from across the waters as well.
Thank you so much for having me. It was
Um,
so good. Ooh, what a way to spend a Friday morning. Love
Likewise.
it.
And thank you to anybody that is watching us on the replay. Thank you for spending 1 hour and 3 minutes and 50 seconds with us. So have a fantastic weekend, everyone. I'll see you next week. Take care.